Mother 3 is one of the most culturally relevant games that is rarely, if ever, discussed in casual gaming circles. The protagonist, Lucas, is in Smash Bros, and that's probably the extent of knowledge the average person has about the game. What most don't know is just how deeply Mother 3 has influenced the video game industry as a whole. Toby Fox, creator of Undertale and Deltarune, cites the Mother series as a primary source of inspiration, having specifically mentioned Mother 2, localized in the States as EarthBound, and Mother 3 on several occasions. So how did a cute little GBA game that was never even published outside of Japan have such a great impact upon the entire video game industry, and does it live up to its reputation? Let's start from the beginning. The Mother series was created by a Japanese writer by the name of Shigesato Itoi. He originally pitched a game more akin to Dragon Quest, but that was apparently shot down by Shigeru Miyamoto at Nintendo. So Itoi went back to the drawing board and came back with Mother. The Mother series is about as far from Dragon Quest as you can get while still being a turn-based RPG, so I'd say the revisions were effective. The series found massive success in Japan, but only ever made its way over to the States in the form of EarthBound. That game features Ness. Different guy. Mother 3, on the other hand, still has not been localized, and it isn't for lack of effort. It's become a running joke in many online circles that Mother 3 will never be officially localized, despite being critically acclaimed and having a cult following. But, you may ask, if the game was never localized, how did it achieve this cult following? The answer is fan translation. From November 2006 to October 2008, a team of dedicated fans took it into their own hands to create a localized version of the entire game, which is what I played for this video. But, you ask again, how would you get this copy without running into legal troubles? It's really quite simple. The translation itself is perfectly legal, as is game emulation. What's illegal is downloading the game's files from the internet. So simply go to Google, look up a copy of the game, and order a copy of the game, and then patch it with the instructions on the fan translation's website. Even easier, if you don't want to figure out how to do that, plenty of online vendors sell handmade physical copies patched with the translated version. These will run you about 15 to 20 bucks. This is as good a time as any to tell you to play the original game. I don't do it justice here, so if you care about spoilers, I'd highly recommend using the information I just gave you to play it yourself. Spoilers do lie ahead, so don't say I didn't warn you. After ensuring that I wouldn't have a bounty placed on my head, I took to Twitch and began streaming my playthrough to determine once and for all whether Mother 3 is as good as they say. I'll spoil it now. Yes, it is. What I realized in playing, though, is that there's one theme in particular which I believe makes Mother 3 so special. Loss. There are, in my eyes, 5 major instances of loss in this game. At the end, they all come together to deliver a powerful message about accepting loss as a part of life. I'll first review the plot of the game, after which I'll break down these instances. I'm going to try to save most discussion for later, but Chapter 1 makes quite the first impression with music. The first song you hear upon opening the game is this lovely melody, which accompanies the character naming screen, aptly dubbed Fun Naming. For the sake of authenticity, I chose to go with all the default choices the game provides, except for my favorite food. That one has to be bread. No! Bread! Ooh, lunch! Bread! I knew I made the right decision putting that as my favorite food. I love the fourth wall breaking here. Bread! They love bread, dude. Bread? Bread! We open at Alex's house, where Lucas and his twin brother Klaus are accompanying their mother. Different mother. I didn't realize in the script it says mother in all caps. We open at Alex's house, where Lucas and his twin brother Klaus are accompanying their mother Hinawa on a trip to visit her father. This is the first time we hear the most famous song in the game, simply called Mother 3 Love Theme, and it's an instant classic. Walking around Alex's place is such a strong first impression. This is also our first introduction to Lucas as a character. He's shy and withdrawn, where his brother Klaus is reckless and energetic. Hinawa sends Lucas to play with Klaus, who's outside roughhousing with the friendly Dragos. This is the first of many times the game makes a meta joke about controls, which is something we see a lot in newer games, but that's a conversation for another time. Try to imagine a thing called a B button. Oh man. We cut to Hinawa sending a letter home to her husband. She notably claims that she'll return home with the boys by sundown, which is not foreboding at all. The first thing we see after Hinawa's definitely not foreshadowing is a bunch of aptly named pig masks setting a forest on fire. Based on what we just saw, it's safe to assume Hinawa and the boys will encounter some complications. The boy's father is a man named Flint. He and his family live in Tasmanley Village, a quiet and peaceful low-tech settlement. Until today, that is. Flint is awoken by the villager Thomas, who in a panic proclaims that the nearby forest has caught fire. The duo retrieve a map from the guy called Mapson and head to the flaming forest, giving us our first look at the combat system. This is also my first complaint with the game. I had absolutely no clue clue how this worked. It was kind of cool to figure it out as I went on, I guess, but I'd like to have some kind of indication that I have to press A in tempo with the battle music to land a combo. I thought the combos were completely random until I had to look it up later. Other than that, the game plays like a normal turn-based RPG and it works great. You pick a combat option for each of your characters and the opponent picks theirs. Whoever moves first depends on who's fastest, and whoever does the most damage depends on the attack and defense of the battlers. We also get another funny fourth wall break here. Upon entering this temple and offering a prayer, the game asks my name. No, not a character's name, mine. It's done in such a nonchalant way that it honestly feels normal, which makes it all the more hilarious. We encounter a man named Lighter collapsed on the ground. He tells Flint that his son Fuel is still trapped in their burning cabin, and Flint saves the kid by destroying part of the cabin. After returning the boy to his father, a villager remarks that the only thing that could make this day weirder would be if it started raining. You're not going to believe what happens next. The fire is extinguished, but the relief doesn't last long. A villager points out that Hanawa and the kids haven't returned yet, and Flint receives her letter claiming they'd return by sundown. Naturally, he and the villagers are a bit worried, so they head back into the forest to search. The family dog Boney joins in the search too. This goes on for a while, until the search party makes a terrifying discovery. A piece of red fabric. That's all you can see, blowing in the wind on a cliff you can't reach. Nobody says anything, but you know the implication. Later, Bronson approaches Flint and tells him the good news first. He's found a Drago Fang, which will serve nicely as a weapon. Then, the bad news. The Fang was found driven through Hanawa's heart. This is a sudden change of tone, and Bronson's delivery in the good news, bad news format makes it that much more prominent. The people of Tazmily Village are so unaccustomed to a tragedy of this magnitude that they aren't even sure how to express it. Flint breaks down, and we're introduced to this central theme of Mother 3, loss. Flint is absolutely devastated, and it's easy to see why. Again, Tazmily has never experienced a tragedy like this, and he doesn't know how to respond. His sons are found alive and well, but that doesn't stop Flint from swinging at the villagers and becoming the first person ever thrown in the town jail. He does break out pretty quickly, though. We discover that Klaus is taken off in an attempt to avenge his mother. Alongside Hanawa's father Alec, we head up to search for him. We first encounter the Magypsies, a group of powerful magicians who will be very important later. Flint and Alec eventually dispatch of this mechanized Drago, which seemed to be responsible for Hanawa's death. Klaus is nowhere to be found. Chapters 2 through 5 are a lot of exposition and setup for the late game. There's a lot of content here, but for the sake of getting to what I want to get to, I'm going to try to keep it light. 2 follows Duster as he heads to a Sohei castle to find a treasure his father Wes claims is hidden there. While in the castle, we encounter this strange girl whose pendant we take after she drops it. After believing that he'd found the treasure, Duster returns to Wes, who is severely disappointed. The duo return to a Sohei castle, where we're formally introduced to its princess, Kumatora. Wes reveals that they actually know each other, and the three join forces to retrieve the Egg of Light. We also get a glimpse at this thing, which will be extremely important later. The chapter ends with the team literally being drained out of the castle and washing up back at Tazmily, notably without Duster and the egg, however. Chapter 3 picks up with Salsa, a monkey whose girlfriend is being held captive by the evil Facade. Facade uses the hostage to force Salsa to do his bidding, which ultimately manifests as heading to the castle in search of the egg Kumatora and company have already retrieved. In frustration, Facade and Salsa return to the inn in Tazmily, where they run into the party. Kumatora and Wes swipe Salsa while Facade sleeps, and the trio attempt to escape. Facade won't be fooled that easy though, and ultimately corners our heroes in the woods. You might be wondering where Lucas is in all this. Well, surprise! He's here now, and he brought the friendly, non-cyborg Dragos to save the day. There's a 3-year time skip before Chapter 4. Duster's been missing, and Facade and the Pigmasks have transformed the peaceful village of Tazmily into what's effectively a modern suburb. Everyone who won't buy into the Industrial Revolution has their houses struck by lightning repeatedly for some mysterious reason. Flint's a shell of his former self, and spends all of his time either visiting Hanawa's grave or searching for Klaus, leaving Lucas and Boney to fend for themselves. Lucas has had enough, and he sets out to find the gang. He overhears a rumor that a band which performs at the nearby factory has a bass guitarist who looks oddly like Duster and brings Boney to investigate. On the way, he encounters one of the Magypsies, Ionia. She grants him the ability to use PSI, the magic system which until now could only be used by Kumatora. She also remarks that Lucas seems able to use PK Love, a form of PSI which nobody prior has been able to perform. Upon reaching the factory and getting into the club, one of the employees seems a little familiar and might recognize Lucas. The show reveals that the guitarist is indeed Duster, and Kumatora convinces the band to let him return with the party. Duster has no memory of anything except where he hid the egg, but he agrees to come along. In my opinion, this is the second major loss in Mother 3. It isn't as drastic as Hanawa's sudden death, but the band losing a beloved member of 3 years is tough on both them and Duster. They sing a song bidding him farewell, and ultimately both the band and Duster must live with the feeling of loss. In Chapter 5, the group tracks down the egg and Duster gets his memory back. The party discovers that Facade and the Pig Masks are operating a giant Tower of Thunder, the source of the lightning which keeps striking the homes of everyone who won't buy into Facade's scheme. Naturally, our heroes destroy the tower, and Facade slips on a banana peel while standing on top and falls. Now remember, back in the Sohei Castle, which was now 3 years ago, Duster obtained one Rope Snake, who now saves the day? Kind of. This is also our first look at the Masked Man, whose identity is kind of a big deal. Chapter 6 is extremely short and might even take place in Lucas's head. As he's falling from the sky in the real world, he dreams of walking through a field of sunflowers with Boney. The image of Hanawa keeps appearing, and we're reminded once again that this is not only a game about Rope Snake, but also grief. Lucas chases the apparition until she steps into the clouds. I said that this might take place in Lucas's head because based on what follows, it's entirely possible that this is real. Lucas, struggling to accept the loss of his mother even 3 years later, leaps out and reaches for Hanawa. Of course, he can't stand on the clouds where she waits, and so he falls. Though you'd assume Chapter 7 of 8 is towards the end of the game, it itself is about half of the entire thing. It begins with Lucas and Boney falling into a pile of hay near Alec's house. Alec reveals that Hanawa's voice spoke to him in a dream, telling him to pile the hay there. Shortly thereafter, Lucas encounters Ionia again, who leads him to Aeolia's house. While there, everything begins shaking. Aeolia realizes that the needle at Sohei Castle has been pulled, which confuses both her and Ionia. It isn't possible for someone to do that without knowing PK Love, and Lucas is supposedly the only person who fulfills that criteria. Aeolia reveals that 7 of these needles exist, each guarded by one of the Magypsies. They're the sealed upon the Dark Dragon, which it is said will either save or destroy the world depending on who pulls the majority of its needles. This is also when we learn that whenever a needle is pulled, the Magypsy watching over it will disappear into nothingness forever. This, as well as what's yet to come, is what I'll lump under the 3rd major instance of loss. Lucas collects the missing party members, and the group spends the rest of Chapter 7 traveling around and meeting the Magypsies in a race to pull more than the Masked Man. There's an important moment here too. Kumatora was raised by the Magypsies, and as such is mortified to see Doria vanish forever. Chapter 8 whisks us away to New Pork City, which I think is best characterized as a futuristic nightmare. The game finally tells us who Facade, the Masked Man, and the Pig Masks were all working for too. It's Pokey Mitch from EarthBound, but this game calls him Porky. Don't worry, you don't need to know much about him from that game, only that he ends up traveling through time and settling on this world as his sandbox, bringing his lackeys the Pig Masks with him. It's revealed in a giant lore dump that the entirety of the Nowhere Islands where the game takes place is all that remains of a world destroyed by humans. The Dark Dragon we've been racing to awaken is the only reason anything exists, having protected these islands from the apocalypse. This, as I see it, is the 4th major loss of the game. We don't experience it, but we learn that the inhabitants of Tazmily Village are the sole survivors of this apocalypse. They erased their memories in order to forget about the lives in the world they'd lost, and to ensure that they would not take a similar path again. This was not long before the events of the game either. It's explained that Kumatora, who's an estimated 18 years old at this point, was an infant when the people of Tazmily escaped to the Nowhere Islands. The happy-go-lucky villagers we see at the beginning of the game are the remnant of what may be mathematically the greatest loss in the history of mankind. On the way to the final needle, the party battles Porky's clones. Flint rejoins the group for the first time since Klaus's disappearance, finally putting an end to 3 years of leaving Lucas out to dry. We'd later battle Porky himself, who meets an anticlimactic end. He seals himself in an invincible capsule, in which he can never be harmed. He can never exit either. This also ties into the theme of loss, but kind of in a weird way. We'll come back to that. The party finally reaches the final needle where the Masked Man awaits. At this point, his identity has been hinted at numerous times, but I've kind of skimmed over those details. Suffice it to say that if you don't know who the Masked Man is at this point, you have not been paying attention. Klaus attacks the party, splitting everyone up for a final one-on-one match with Lucas. This is hardly a battle, however. Lucas can't bring himself to attack, and the Masked Man won't stop his onslaught. The battle progresses by itself, and the player just needs to make sure Lucas doesn't run out of HP. After a while, Hanawa begins speaking to Klaus, begging him to remember who he is. We get what I think is one of the most beautiful scenes in all of fiction, and then my favorite song in the game begins to play. It's a rendition of the love theme simply called It's Over. As if mimicking Klaus's internal battle, the song transforms between a sharp and tumultuous staccato version and what I can only describe as the feeling of a hug when everything in the world is going wrong. Finally, Hanawa gets through to Klaus with a line that simply breaks me every time I think about it. Klaus removes his mask. He fires a massive bolt of lightning at Lucas, knowing that Lucas has an item called the Franklin Badge which will reflect the attack. Klaus takes mortal damage, a phrase which up until now had been reserved for party members when their HP reaches 0. In terms of impact for the player, Klaus's death is the single biggest loss in Mother 3. In my mind, the only one in contention for the spot is Hinawa's in Chapter 1. What's different here though is how Flint and Lucas react. To better understand this, let's go all the way back to the beginning. The first instance of loss is Hinawa's death. Flint spirals out of control, losing himself in his grief for 3 years. The village is distraught. Lucas can't stop crying. Klaus sets out to avenge her and disappears. Over the course of the game, we see everyone learn to handle grief. Duster leaves the band, and they all accept it immediately despite how upset they are. Kumatora is distraught when Doria vanishes, but by the time Ionia gives her final farewell, she's learned to accept it and move forward with her head held high. The two major outliers here are the people of Tazmily replacing their memories of the former world, and Porky sealing himself away. Both decisions that may seem logical, but ultimately do not address the root of their issues. Finally, there's Klaus's death. Last time, Flint and Lucas were unable to come to terms with their grief. Their lives were ruined, and they couldn't carry on. This is where their arcs are finally completed. After Klaus's death, Lucas gently lays him down and steps back. Flint tells Lucas to forgive his hasty brother, and Lucas pulls the final needle. The last step in saving the world. And this is the secret sixth loss in Mother 3. Giant pieces of falling rock destroy Newport City and rain down upon the Nowhere Islands. The Dark Dragon is awakened, and it seems all is lost. But it isn't. This is the final message of Mother 3. On the end screen, you, the player, walk around and speak with the characters. What seemed to be the ultimate loss, shoved right at the end of what should have been a heartwarming ending, turned out to be the heartwarming ending. This is the message of Mother 3, and why it's so well beloved. Everyone's learned to live with loss, and like the Magypsies, simply treat it as a part of life. The dragon did not destroy the Nowhere Islands. Everyone's fine. Lucas, Kumatora, Boney, Duster, Flint, Salsa, and his girlfriend, despite what seemed to literally be the end of the world, everything's okay. Everyone's okay. You're okay.